Hey guys, it's Ted Bogert. Welcome back to the TED Show. I know you can't tell by my outfit today, but today is Cinco de Mayo. You should look that up, see what that means. Super excited to have this young man on the show. Jay Gaudet is on the show. We're going to talk about the Black Monopoly movement and so much more. Welcome, Jay. How are you today?
Man, I'm good. Thank you for having me, Ted. It is definitely an honor to be on here.
Well,
So
the
thanks
honor
a
is all
lot.
mine, my friend. You're saying all the right words. Come back on anytime.
Yes, sir.
I told you before we went live, the audience loved origin story, and I also told you before we went live that I actually looked through
Hmm.
some of your social media, your link tree, and fascinating. I'm really excited about this topic. So before we do that, though, origin story. Tell them a little bit about you.
Definitely, definitely. So, yeah, man, I grew up in what they would call the West Bank, about 10 minutes outside of New Orleans, Harvey, Louisiana, and I was basically affected by Hurricane Katrina. My Hurricane Katrina came my senior year in high school. So I always tell people, if you're from New Orleans and you get hurricane scares every year, majority of the time back then, a lot of times you just didn't pay much attention to them because the elders, they kind of were like, oh, nothing's gonna happen, we don't have to worry about it, etc. So I remember that day. It was the first week of high school. I had the most amazing week of school that I've ever had in my 4 years of in high school. And that Friday, my mom came and said, "Go gas the car. We evacuate." And I'm like, "No, I'm not going nowhere. I got a job interview on Monday." I said, "I'm staying right here. We're not going nowhere." And it turned out that Hurricane Katrina was in effect. We actually did evacuate, and I ended up spending my the first half of my high school year in Atlanta
Wow.
before coming back January of 2006 and finishing up in back in New Orleans. And that following semester, I came to Baton Rouge and been that's my home now, and I've been here ever since. And it's pretty much where I started my career, man. My mom was a broker.
Oh, she
Uh,
was
yeah,
very cool.
my mom was a real estate broker, and she basically tried to get me to get my real estate license coming out of high school, and I fought it tooth and nail because at
And
the
that's what we
time
do to our parents, man. You
we
don't want
do,
that.
and you just don't know. So my mom was a residential agent. She didn't really climb, that deep into the industry. And all I can remember is that we used to go to open houses after church on Sunday. And I said, well, if that's what real estate is, I don't want to have nothing to do with that. So I went to college and got 2 degrees for something totally different. And it came full circle when I met my wife, almost 11 years ago. We've been married for 9 years. And she came to me and said, I want to start a business. And I said, nah, you can start a business by yourself. I said, because my experience with entrepreneurship was my mom was a realtor, and we had a family business, a hat shop, a hat business in the community. And when her and my dad divorced, she had to close the business down. So I had some PTSD about being an entrepreneur,
Understood.
just growing up. So when my wife came and said she wanted to start a business, I said, you know what? I'm just getting my degree. I'm climbing the corporate ladder. That's my mission now. I'm sticking to it. You can start a business. I'll be over here to support you on the side. And she did that. She
Good
took my
for
advice and did
her.
it and did exactly that. She went and started the company, and it's in the beginning we were just we were basically a small to medium sized construction company in maintenance, and our clients, we did most of our business with the government. So we would do like statewide and federal government contracts, and we did that for a number of years until we were really young, made a lot of money, and we ended up at one point having over 30 employees until one day my wife was like, I really don't like this. Like I just don't like it. And I basically ended up in a business that I didn't even start on my own to being in a business on my own. And I said, okay, well, this is not what we got into business for. Initially, when we got into business, because I did have some understanding of construction and real estate, and she had some knowledge in administration, and even with different maintenance projects that went from what she worked on in college. We said we're just gonna marry these two together and work it together. But ultimately, once I started to really research more about real estate, I knew at that moment that I wanted to be in commercial real estate and real estate development. So when we built the company up and had all of the staff, and we would say, well, this wasn't what we was designed to do anyway. That wasn't the direction that we were looking to go in. So we allowed the contracts to term. We didn't renew any of the contracts, and we pivoted the business. We didn't bid on another contract.
Love
We
it.
literally lived for the next 9 months on savings. We didn't make any money. We went from making $60,000 a month to $0 a month.
Yeah.
And we did that, and it was through that time that I went and got licensed because at that part there was something called the Great Flood. Look, everything has happened around natural disasters right here in Louisiana. Right? That's how, that's
Remind me not to fly with you. I'm not sure.
Typically, if you're in Louisiana, a natural disaster happens. Two things can happen: either you can fail from it, or it could be a thing of opportunity.
Amen.
But so in 2016 in Baton Rouge, there's something called the Great Flood of Baton Rouge, and where I want to say more than 50% of the city flooded, and a lot of them weren't in what they would call flood zones. So a lot of people who weren't required to have flood insurance, their properties, their homes still flooded. Well, at the time, because we were in that sector and we were kind of pivoting the business from working in local government to more private sector, we were basically renovating these homes for people who had flood claims, and we ran into a lot of clients that didn't have flood insurance, old elderly people who just couldn't renovate their homes, and we were in position to purchase some of those and start flipping properties. And that was when I really started to kind of understand and get more entrenched into what the investment side of real estate was. And once the inventory started to kind of die down a little bit, I called my mom up. I told my wife, I said, I'm gonna go get my real estate license. I said, because now I want to continue the momentum that we have, and I just want to be able to look for my own deals. And of course, anybody who's in real estate know that you ought to be in real estate. You have to have a license for at least 4 years to be your own broker. So my mom was a broker, but she was inactive. She just came off of battling breast cancer at the time, and I called her and I said, "Look, whatever it's going to take for you to get back active, I'm gonna go ahead and do it because I'm going to get my license. But I want you to just come on with the company so we can turn it into a full service real estate brokerage." And that's what we did. And that was
Did she say told you so?
she did. She did. Of course. Of course she did. Of course she did. Everything came back full circle. And yeah, I've developed my career over that time to do only commercial real estate and development. I have done some residential for friends and family, and then even on the investment side. But in particular, like what I like to tell people is I do get people ask me and say, well, why are you such an advocate of minorities owning commercial real estate? Why is that such a big thing? Because that is access to capital and commercial real estate are two areas where we have been um, hugely underrepresented.
Agreed.
And I find it a personal mission to help people understand that the acquisition of something, asset class that's commercial real estate, immediately can change a person's net worth.
Yes.
And
Is that what the Black Monopoly movement is all about?
that's what it's about. It is about minorities becoming more net worth focused opposed to being income focused. And this was a revelation for me because I found it at a point in life. I came from a household where um, we weren't taught to save. We weren't taught money management. We weren't taught those things. My mom's philosophy when it came to money is, and whenever you got a large sum of it, find something to do with it before it runs out. And that was like totally the wrong situation.
Hopefully,
So
mom's not listening to that.
I hope not. But getting with my wife who learned the total opposite. So you could imagine, us being together and being married for in our early 20s, first couple of years, things were a little bit different. So but I was able to learn a lot from her and from my father-in-law to be able to understand exactly what money management really meant. And I had the revelation that it wasn't really that difficult for me to make money. It wasn't that difficult for me to go and produce income, but it can be difficult if you're not thinking about your net worth to go and produce some income and not understand that you still have to decrease your debt at the same time while you're producing income. And that's what the movement is about. It's about showing minorities that, you know, assets are important and net worth is important.
How are you how are you doing? Because I'm fascinated by this. I feel like the accessibility is the key, and
yeah.
knowing about the accessibility. So you might know about it, but then how do you get to it? You might
Mm,
want to do it, but how do I access that? Who do
yeah.
I talk to? What are some of the tools that people can use? Are there websites? Are there organizations? What are some of the recommendations that you have?
So one of the biggest recommendations that I would say is basically just, you know, utilizing all, you know, internet platforms, you know, Google, just getting a better understanding of finances as a whole. And for me, you know, that was my approach, and it's still an approach that I take on now, because when I can remember at 21 purchasing a property, you know, my first investment property with my mom, I still didn't have a really good understanding of what wealth was, of what, you know, or what it meant to even get funded for a loan, to even know even the marginalization that we were going through at that time, until I purchased that property and I said, okay, well, I'm an investor now. I can go out and do this again. And that property didn't require me to use a bank. You know, we did a negotiation with the sellers on a bond for deed, and we was able to use some other money to get it renovated. So I didn't actually have to go that route. But now in my mind, I'm saying, okay, well, this should be easy to navigate. So when I go and try to get a loan and try to do it again, I'm like, well, why am I getting declined? You know, why am I not able to obtain funding? And my mind tells me, say, okay, well, you have to understand this industry. It was a certain gap that was there when it came to education, of just being informed on how lenders underwrite commercial deals for minorities, and what are the things that they look at. So what I did at that point, my brokerage started partnering with lending institutions, so I can actually be part of the origination phase. I can be part of the underwriting phase, because I had clients that were coming to me that were looking to purchase real estate, but they still needed funding. And I would be using different relationships to help get them financed, and we were still coming in a roadblock. So I'm like, well, there's a barrier there. It's just, and whatever the barrier is, we just need to know what it is so we can know how to navigate through it. And that became the mission for the Black Monopolies, understanding what the barriers are. You know, I wrote a guide called Underwriting Secrets. Just a quick guide telling people how to understand what underwriters look for when you're applying for funding. You know, the lending industry and the commercial real estate industry goes hand in hand. And like I said, you know, as minorities, black and brown minorities in the country, we represent 12.1% of the population, but we own less than 1% of commercial real estate in the market share. So
What's the biggest myth, Jay? Like, if somebody's listening, which I know they are, and going, "Well, that sounds great, Jay, but I don't have this," or
mm,
it's too difficult because of this, and even if I knew how to access it all, there would still be this. What's a roadblock myth, maybe that you have come across when you are talking to potential investors?
so the biggest myth is that you need a whole bunch of money to do it.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell.
It's
And
true. I feel like you're right. I feel like people think, all right, well, I don't have 90% down, so there's absolutely no way that I can, because I'm in the lending world. We hear it on
yeah,
that side as well.
yeah,
There's no way that I'm ever going to be able to do it, and I'm never going to save up enough money. So therefore, sounds like a great dream, Jay, but it's just not for me.
right, yeah, and that's the biggest myth. And because of that, it's, you know, I did a presentation yesterday that, you know, the resources are there, and sometimes even when the resources are there, if they're not easy if they're not easy to navigate, it's like they're not there.
That's correct.
So as business owners, as investors, if we're entrenched in what we're doing on a daily basis, we're entrenched in our business, and I need to go and I'm going to a resource that's going to help me to obtain this goal that I have. But when they open the door for me, I'm walking into a maze. That's just as discouraging as not having
Agreed.
access to it.
I agree. I
You
think
know,
it's hard. It's if you don't have like you had at least a taste of it with your mom. Like you kind
yeah,
of understood. You knew you didn't want to do that, or at least that
yeah,
what you thought you didn't want to do. But I think people who are, whenever I go to an event or I listen to a speaker talk about homeowner accessibility, homeownership. Um, it always seems to me you can see the size because people really do believe that sounds so great. I would love to be that, but There's so many buts. So the fact that you're out there educating, the education is the first way to get them. And then you can say, here's where you can find out more information, to educate them that they are not automatically discounted. They're not automatically not going to be able to access. They're not automatically, there's no automatic if you get to understand the process and you really, really begin to work with somebody like you, have that kind of consult, that kind of support. That is huge. It's huge. And it's what I'm a member of NAREP, which is the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals. And the number one goal there is accessible homeownership for the Hispanic community, similar to what the Black Monopoly movement is. You have to be able to educate people, though, and they have to know where to go, and they have to feel like they trust someone as well, because there's lots of shysters.
Oh, most definitely.
So many shysters.
Most definitely.
All right, Jay, so tell them the best way they can find out more. I love this topic. By the way, if you do presentations, I love to do remote presentations. So we'll have to have you do some presentations and have you come back and do some educational stuff for my audience. But tell them the best way they can reach you, find out more about you, what you do, and how you are helping in the Black Monopoly movement.
Yes, definitely. You guys can go to the website at ownyourkeys.com. That's OWNYOURKEYS.com. Follow us at Own Your Keys on Instagram and the Monopoly Boss on Instagram as well. And, it's easy as a DM, y'all. If you DM us, go to the website, we respond, we answer any questions that you have. There's even material for you to be able to download for free to be able to get a better understanding on how us as minorities can get the yes to the money and put our foot in this commercial real estate game. So let's get it.
Please come back, Jay, anytime. Y'all reach out. You're always asking me for ways to get involved in real estate, owning your own business, being an entrepreneur. You got a resource right here, Mr. Jay Gaudet. Thank you so much for being on the show, buddy. I appreciate you. Reach out to him. I've got the link tree going, but I'll also post ownyourrealestate.com. Is that what it is?
Own Your Keys.
Ownyourkeys.com. I'll post that in the comments as well. Jay, thanks so much, man. That was so
good.
Thanks
for having me.
So good. All right, guys, get out there, build some generational wealth.